Zara Anderson stared at her husband, Sheriff Levi Tate, as he pressed another woman against the wall of the saloon, their lips locked in a passionate embrace that left no doubt about their intentions. Her heart shattered in that moment, right there on Main Street in Willow Creek, 1875, with half the town as witness to her humiliation. The warm Arizona sun beat down mercilessly as Zara stood frozen, the basket of fresh vegetables she'd picked up from the general store dropping from her trembling hands. Tomatoes rolled across the dusty street as whispers erupted around her. Sheriff Tate had been the town's most respected man and her husband of 5 years, but this wasn't the first time rumors had swirled about his infidelities. It was, however, the first time she'd seen it with her own eyes. Mrs. Tate, Mrs. Wilson, the baker's wife, approached cautiously, her hand extended in sympathy. Zara shook her head, backing away. She gathered her skirts and fled, tears blurring her vision as she ran past the curious onlookers who pretended not to stare. The shame burned hotter than the midday sun. 5 years she'd devoted to that man. 5 years of cooking his meals, washing his clothes, warming his bed, and turning a blind eye to the whispers. She burst through the door of their modest home at the edge of town, the same home where she'd once dreamed of raising children with a man she thought loved her. Now, those dreams lay shattered like the china plate she hurled against the wall. Yanking open drawers and closets, Zara began stuffing her belongings into a traveling case. She wouldn't stay another night under the same roof as Levi Tate. Her fingers trembled as she folded her dresses, her mind racing with questions about where she would go, how she would survive. A soft knock at the door interrupted her frantic packing. She wiped her tears, straightened her dress, and opened it to find Yorick Rawlins standing on her porch, hat in hand, his expression solemn. "Mrs. Tate," he said softly, his voice deep and steady, "I thought you might need some assistance." Yorick Rawlins wasn't like the other men in Willow Creek. He'd arrived 3 years ago, buying a small ranch outside town, keeping mostly to himself except when he came in for supplies or the occasional drink at the saloon. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled, which wasn't often. The ladies in town whispered about him, the mysterious cowboy who spoke little but watched everything. "Mr. Rawlins," Zara acknowledged, her voice hoarse from crying. "I appreciate your concern, but I saw what happened in town," he interrupted gently. "And I'm offering you a place to stay until you decide what you want to do. My sister's old cabin sits empty on the north side of my property. It's small, but it's clean and private." Zara hesitated. Accepting help from a single man would set tongues wagging even more than they already were. But the thought of facing the town's pity or worse, staying to confront Levi, made her stomach turn. "Why would you help me?" she asked, studying his weathered face. Yorick shifted his weight, his blue eyes meeting hers steadily. "Because no one deserves to be treated that way, Mrs. Tate, and because I know what it's like to need a fresh start." Before she could respond, the sound of approaching hoofbeats made them both turn. Sheriff Tate was galloping toward the house, his face contorted with anger. "You should go," Zara said urgently. "He has a temper." Yorick stood his ground. "I'm not leaving you alone with him." Sheriff Tate dismounted before his horse had fully stopped, his hand resting on his gun. "What are you doing at my house, Rawlins?" he demanded, staggering slightly. Zara could smell the whiskey from where she stood. "Just offering Mrs. Tate some assistance," Yorick replied calmly. "You stay away from my wife," Tate snarled, stepping closer. "This is between me and her." Zara moved between them. "There's nothing between us anymore, Levi. I'm leaving." The sheriff's face darkened. "Like hell you are. You're my wife." A wife you just publicly humiliated, she shot back, finding courage in her anger. Everyone saw you with that woman. Tate laughed cruelly. Jealous, Zara. Maybe if you weren't so cold in bed. Yorick moved so quickly that neither Zara nor the sheriff saw it coming. One moment Tate was hurling insults. The next he was sprawled in the dirt, blood trickling from his lip. That's no way to speak to a lady, Yorick said quietly, flexing his fingers. The sheriff scrambled to his feet, reaching for his gun, but Yorick's voice stopped him. I wouldn't do that, Sheriff. Even drunk as you are, you know what would happen if you draw that weapon. Something in Yorick's steady gaze made the sheriff pause. Everyone in the territory had heard rumors about Yorick Rawlins, that he'd ridden with dangerous men before settling in Willow Creek, that he was faster with a gun than he let on. This isn't over, Tate spat, wiping blood from his mouth. Yes, it is, Zara said firmly. I'm leaving you, Levi. I'll file for divorce. The sheriff's laugh was ugly. Good luck with that. I'm the law in this town. Who's going to help you? I will, Yorick said simply. Tate's eyes narrowed as he looked between them. So that's how it is. You've been sneaking around with him. No, Zara replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. But I am accepting Mr. Rawlins's offer of a place to stay. You'll regret this, Tate threatened, backing toward his horse. Both of you. They watched as he mounted and rode away, kicking up dust in his wake. Zara released a shaky breath. Thank you, Mr. Rawlins. Yorick, he corrected gently. And there's no need for thanks. Can I help you with your things? Within the hour, they had loaded Zara's trunks onto Yorick's wagon. She took one last look at the house where she had lived for 5 years before climbing up beside him on the seat. Ready? He asked. Zara nodded, surprisingly calm now that the decision had been made. Yes, I'm ready. The sun was setting as they traveled the winding road to Yorick's ranch, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Zara felt a weight lifting from her shoulders with each mile that stretched between her and the life she was leaving behind. It's not much, Yorick said as they approached a small cabin nestled among pine trees, separate from the main ranch house. But it's peaceful. The cabin was indeed small, just one room with a bed, table, 2 chairs, and a pot-bellied stove. But it was clean, with curtains at the windows and a colorful quilt on the bed. My sister lived here for a time, Yorick explained as he carried in her trunks, before she married and moved to California. It's perfect, Zara said honestly. After the chaos of the day, the cabin's simplicity felt like a sanctuary. There's a well out back and I'll bring you firewood. The main house is just over that rise if you need anything. He hesitated at the door. Will you be all right here tonight? Zara nodded. Yes, and thank you, Yorick. Truly, he tipped his hat. Get some rest, Mrs. Tate. Zara, she corrected. Just Zara now. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Good night, Zara. As promised, Yorick kept his distance, respecting her need for solitude. Each morning she would find fresh firewood stacked by her door, and sometimes eggs or vegetables from his garden. They spoke only when necessary, usually when he came to check if she needed anything from town. A week passed, then 2. Zara began to explore the ranch, finding comfort in the open spaces and the rhythm of rural life. She watched from a distance as Yorick tended his cattle and mended fences, his movements efficient and purposeful. One evening, as the first chill of autumn crept into the air, Zara decided to repay his kindness. She baked bread using the small stove in her cabin and walked it over to his house while it was still warm. Yorick answered her knock with surprise, the aroma of beef stew wafting from inside. I thought you might like some fresh bread, she said, offering the loaf wrapped in a clean cloth. He looked at it as if she'd handed him gold. Would you? Would you like to stay for supper? The stew's almost ready. They ate at his kitchen table. the conversation initially awkward but gradually easing into comfortable exchanges. Yorick told her about his ranch, his hopes to expand his herd, while she shared stories of her childhood in Missouri before coming west with her father. "How did you end up married to Tate?" he asked finally, refilling her coffee cup. Zara sighed. "I was 19, naive. My father died shortly after we arrived in Willow Creek. Levi was charming, established. He seemed like security." She traced the rim of her cup. "What a fool I was." "Not a fool," Yorick corrected gently. "Just someone who wanted to believe in something good." Their eyes met across the table, and something shifted between them, a recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits. After that night, the walls between them began to crumble. Zara started helping around the ranch, collecting eggs from the chickens, and tending to a small vegetable garden beside her cabin. Sometimes they would share meals, talking late into the evening. She learned that Yorick had lost his wife and infant son to fever 7 years ago in Texas, that his quiet demeanor masked a deep capacity for feeling. 1 month after Zara left her husband, Judge Harmon arrived from the county seat for his quarterly circuit. It was her chance to file for divorce. Yorick offered to take her to town, his presence a silent support as they rode in his wagon. Willow Creek's Main Street looked exactly as she remembered, yet everything felt different. People stared as they passed, whispers following in their wake. Zara held her head high, clutching the papers she'd prepared. Outside the temporary courthouse, actually just a room above the bank, they encountered Sheriff Tate. He was exiting the building with Deputy Miller, his face hardening at the sight of them. Well, he drawled, blocking their path. "The runaway wife returns." Yorick stepped forward, but Zara placed a restraining hand on his arm. "I've come to see Judge Harmon," she said evenly. Tate smirked. "About our marriage, save yourself the trouble. No judge in the territory will grant a divorce to a woman who abandoned her husband to live with another man. She has her own cabin," Yorick stated flatly. "And who's going to believe that?" Tate looked around at the gathering crowd. "Everyone knows what's really going on." Zara felt her face flush with anger and embarrassment. "What's going on is that I'm leaving a man who publicly humiliated me." "Careful, Zara," Tate warned, his hand drifting toward his gun. "Slander is a serious accusation." "It's not slander if it's true," called a voice from the crowd. "Mrs. Wilson stepped forward, her normally timid demeanor replaced with determination. "We all saw you with that saloon girl, Sheriff, right out in the street in broad daylight." Others murmured agreement, emboldened by Mrs. Wilson's courage. Tate's face darkened with rage. "This isn't your business, Margaret. When you abuse your position and mistreat good people, it becomes everyone's business," she replied firmly. The sheriff's hand closed around his gun, but Deputy Miller grabbed his arm. "Not here, Levi. Not now." Tate shook him off but stepped back. "This isn't over," he hissed, echoing his words from that day at the house. He stalked away, shouldering roughly past onlookers. Judge Harmon proved to be a fair-minded man who listened carefully to Zara's petition. The testimony of several townspeople regarding the sheriff's public indiscretion helped her case considerably. "I'll grant your divorce, Mrs. Tate," the judge said finally. "On grounds of adultery and abandonment, the papers will be ready tomorrow." Relief washed over Zara like a cool rain. As they left the courthouse, she felt lighter than she had in years. "Thank you for coming with me," she told Yorick as he helped her into the wagon. He nodded, a small smile playing at his lips. "I'm proud of you." Those simple words warmed her more than any elaborate compliment could have. That evening, they celebrated her impending freedom with a special supper at his house. Yorick had shot a wild turkey, and Zara prepared it with herbs from her garden. They ate by lamplight, talking and laughing with an ease that felt both new and familiar. As the night grew late, Yorick walked her back to her cabin, the moon lighting their path. "Tomorrow you'll be free," he said as they reached her door. "Yes," she agreed, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. "What will you do then?" Zara looked up at him, at this man who had shown her nothing but kindness and respect. "I'm not sure yet, but I'd like to stay here if that's all right." His eyes softened. More than all right. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, a question rather than a demand. When they parted, Yorick brushed a strand of hair from her face with a tenderness that made her heart ache. "Good night, Zara," he whispered before walking back toward his house. She watched him go, touching her lips in wonder. The next morning, as Zara was preparing to return to town for her divorce papers, they heard horses approaching. Yorick grabbed his rifle and stepped outside, motioning for her to stay back. Sheriff Tate rode up with 3 men, not his deputies, but rough-looking strangers with guns at their hips. "Rawlins," Tate called, "I've come for my wife." Yorick stood his ground, rifle ready but not raised. "She's not your wife anymore, Tate, and she's not going anywhere she doesn't want to go." "That's where you're wrong." Tate dismounted, his companions following suit. "Judge or no judge, she's mine until I say otherwise." Zara stepped out of the cabin, ignoring Yorick's warning glance. "Go home, Levi. It's over." The sheriff's face contorted with rage. "You think you can humiliate me like this? The whole town laughing behind my back because my wife ran off with some ranch hand." "You humiliated yourself," she replied steadily. "And I didn't run off with anyone. I left a man who didn't respect our marriage vows." One of Tate's companions snickered, earning a venomous glare from the sheriff. "Last chance, Zara," Tate warned. "Come home now and I might forgive this. Indiscretion, she's staying here," Yorick said quietly. The sheriff's hand moved to his gun. "Then I'll have to take her." What happened next occurred so quickly that Zara could barely follow it. Tate went for his weapon, but Yorick was faster, impossibly fast. Before the sheriff could clear leather, Yorick had his rifle aimed at the man's chest. "Don't," Yorick said, his voice deadly calm. The 3 men with Tate had also drawn, creating a tense standoff. 4 against 1, Rawlins, Tate sneered. "Not good odds." "Make that 2 against 4, came a new voice. Deputy Miller rode up, his shotgun trained on the group. "And these odds don't favor you, Sheriff." Tate's head whipped around. "What the hell are you doing, Miller?" "My job," the deputy replied evenly. "Upholding the law, not helping you terrorize innocent people." A tense silence fell over the group. Zara held her breath, her heart pounding in her chest. "You're making a mistake," Tate told his deputy. "No, you are," Miller replied. "Judge Harmon wants to see you. Seems there have been complaints about how you've been running things in Willow Creek. He sent me to bring you in." Tate's face paled slightly. "This is ridiculous." "Maybe. But you're coming with me all the same." Miller gestured to the 3 strangers. "And your friends here are going to ride in the opposite direction and never come back." For a long moment, Zara thought Tate might try to fight his way out. But something in Deputy Miller's resolute expression must have convinced him otherwise. "This isn't over," Tate muttered as he holstered his weapon. "Yes, it is," Miller said firmly. "Now mount up." They watched as the sheriff rode away with his deputy, the 3 strangers heading in another direction. Only when they were out of sight did Yorick lower his rifle. Zara's legs gave way, and she sank onto the porch steps, trembling with delayed fear and relief. "Are you all right?" Yorick asked, kneeling beside her. She nodded, unable to speak for a moment. When she found her voice, she asked, "Will he come back?" "I don't think so," Yorick said thoughtfully. "Not after this. Miller seems like a good man. He'll make sure the judge hears about what happened here today." He was right. 2 days later, they learned that Judge Harmon had suspended Sheriff Tate pending an investigation into numerous complaints. Zara received her divorce papers, officially ending her marriage to Levi Tate. As summer faded into autumn, Zara and Yorick's relationship deepened. She moved from the small cabin into the main house, helping him run the ranch and building a new life together. They took their time, neither wanting to rush what was growing between them. One crisp October evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky, Yorick took her hand. "I never thought I'd find happiness again after I lost my family," he said softly. "I came here to be alone, to just exist, and then you arrived." Zara squeezed his hand. "You saved me." "No," he corrected gently. "You saved yourself. I just offered a place to stand while you did it." 3 months after her divorce became final, on a bright winter morning with snow dusting the ground, Yorick and Zara rode into Willow Creek together. They went straight to the church, where Reverend Johnson was waiting with Deputy Miller, now acting Sheriff Miller, and his wife as witnesses. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. Zara wore a new blue dress, Yorick a clean black suit. They exchanged vows and rings, promising to honor and cherish each other for all their days. News of their marriage spread through town like wildfire. Many were shocked not just by the hasty wedding, but by the transformation in Zara. Gone was the sheriff's meek, unhappy wife. In her place stood a confident woman who glowed with contentment. Mrs. Wilson hosted an impromptu celebration at the hotel restaurant, where townspeople came to offer congratulations and, in some cases, apologies for not standing up for Zara sooner. "What will you do now?" Acting Sheriff Miller asked as they shared a celebratory meal. Yorick looked at Zara, his eyes soft with love. "We're expanding the ranch. Zara has quite a head for business, it turns out." She smiled, still unused to praise after years of criticism. "We're going to try raising horses as well as cattle. Yorick's a fine horseman." As they prepared to leave town as husband and wife, Zara spotted a familiar figure watching from the shadows of the saloon. Former Sheriff Tate, stripped of his badge and most of his dignity, raised a whiskey glass in a mocking toast. Yorick noticed him too, his arm tightening protectively around Zara's waist. "He can't hurt us anymore," she said softly. "No," Yorick agreed. "He can't." They rode home as the sun began to set, the future stretching before them like the open road. Spring brought new life to the Rawlins ranch. The mares they'd purchased were heavy with foal, the cattle were thriving, and Zara's garden burst with early vegetables and flowers. But the greatest blessing was the one they'd just confirmed. Zara was expecting their first child. "Are you happy?" Yorick asked as they lay in bed one night, his hand resting gently on her still flat stomach. Zara covered his hand with her own. "Happier than I ever thought possible." "When I saw you that day on Main Street," he confessed, "watching your heart break in front of everyone, something broke in me too. I'd been watching you for years, you know, admiring your grace, your kindness, hating how he treated you. Why didn't you ever speak to me before?" She asked, curious rather than accusatory. "You were married," he said simply. "I respect that, even if he didn't." Zara turned to face him, tracing his features in the moonlight. "I'm glad you were there that day." "I'll always be there," he promised, kissing her softly. "Every day, for the rest of our lives." And he was. Through the birth of their daughter the following winter, through the expansion of their ranch into one of the most successful in the territory, through all the joys and challenges that came their way. 5 years after that fateful day on Main Street, Zara stood on the porch of their home, expanded now to accommodate their growing family, watching Yorick teach their daughter to ride her pony. Their son, just learning to walk, clutched her skirts as he took unsteady steps. The town of Willow Creek had changed too. Levi Tate had eventually moved away, unable to bear the daily reminder of his fall from grace. Acting Sheriff Miller had been elected properly and was running the town with fairness and integrity. The scandal that had once threatened to define Zara was now just a faded memory, replaced by the respect she'd earned as Mrs. Rawlins. As Yorick lifted their laughing daughter from the pony and carried her toward the house, Zara reflected on the journey that had brought them here. How the most painful day of her life had ultimately led to her greatest happiness. "What are you thinking about?" Yorick asked as he set their daughter down to run inside. Zara smiled, leaning into his embrace. "Just that sometimes the end of one story is really the beginning of a better one." He kissed her then, in the golden light of the setting sun, as their children played around them, and their home stood strong against the backdrop of the western sky, a testament to the love that had shocked a town and changed their lives forever.